So today we're talking about the career report, which is the next assignment that you are supposed to turn in. Because of the mistake made with the calendar, the syllabus, I said you could turn in the memo or the career report, but just sticking with our original syllabus, this is the next topic that we would typically talk about if we were in a standard classroom together. So this PowerPoint is solely for the purpose of helping you be successful on this next assignment. Now, if we were in your typical classroom, the other thing that I would typically do at the start of class is just check in and make sure everyone's feeling okay about dates and see if anybody had any questions. So, one of the things that came to light for the mid-semester feedback was that people wanted some kind of document that broke down the due dates and when things were, upcoming, which is typically the syllabus. But I understand that there's a lot of other things on the syllabus. There's, suggested reading, there's all kinds of other things that are on the syllabus. So, yes, it is, I think, helpful to have some, just like a document just with due dates. So, if you wanted your memo or career report reviewed, you needed to get that into me by the 23rd of October. If you want it to be due on time, if you want full credit for the report, you need to have it in by the 29th. So the memo or the career report. Same thing for the 6th, either the career or the memo on the 6th of November. And then that will be due on the 12th of November. The proposal, if you want it reviewed by me, so you want feedback before you turned it in, then you can turn that in on the 20th. And I do ask that you email these to me so that I know. I'm not always real good about CourseWeb. I'm trying to get better. I'm Johnny on the spot with email, but CourseWeb is something that I'm definitely having to train myself to check into. Check my email like every hour, but CourseWeb, I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta check CourseWeb too. So, and then if you want, if you want to make sure that it's done on time, you want to make sure you get that proposal in by the 22nd of November. Your final presentation must be loaded by the 27th, but if you want me to help you work on it, we need to meet by the 22nd. Just a couple of notes here. I'm happy to meet with you during office hours, Skype, FaceTime, or any other method to work on your presentations. All your presentations have to be loaded by the 27th, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please make sure to allow time for technical trouble. Make sure to dress professionally. We'll talk more about this once we get a little bit closer to it, but these are the steps that I obviously you can read. I'm not going to read this to you, but I wanted to let you know that I am going to put this document up on our course web page, and that I had promised many of you, based off the discussion board feedback, that this document would be created, and I am a woman of my word, so this was made. Here is, all those dates and when things are due. Hopefully this alleviates any kind of confusion that you have about what's up and coming. So if you want it looked at by me and feedback prior to feeding it, turning it in, those are the dates where it says reviewed. If you just want to make sure that you get things done and hand it in on time, there's the dates. I certainly can appreciate the fact that not everyone has time to do the reading. I think that we're in different places probably in our career. I know as a student, I didn't always have time to do the textbook reading. Sometimes, it got pushed by the wayside. Now when I take classes, because I'm paying for them, I definitely pay for the classes myself. So I am doing the reading because I do want to learn everything. It's more about learning at this point rather than maybe getting the grade or keeping a scholarship. Right now, I'm taking a grant writing class, an advanced grant writing class, to learn more about how to be a better grant writer. And I'm definitely doing all the reading because I really want to learn about it. But that's a very different place in your life than being a student and trying to take multiple classes and trying to have a life and trying to figure out what you want to do with it. And so I understand if you don't always get to the textbook reading, but it would be helpful and I think you would understand things on a deeper level if you did get to it. So just a side note. Okay, so back to kind of the point of today, which is talking about this career report and making sure that you're successful when you write it. So here are some tips. This is what we're going to talk about today. First off, you do not come here with a blank slate. There are things that you know about the career, likely, anyway, that you're talking about. Now, this was an opportunity for many of you to explore a career that you had been thinking about but didn't know a lot about. I'm guessing, though, that a lot of you probably picked a safe option, something that you are either majoring in or something that you've already done a fair amount of research on. So you don't start this kind of career report with a blank slate. You come to the table with a certain amount of knowledge about the topic. So you've got what you know. Now you have to kind of obtain some secondary sources. You want a good mix. So newspaper articles, online articles, peer-reviewed journals, books, if you can find them, that they provide a lot of depth. Figure out who you're going to interview and what time. Obviously, we're going to talk about how to prepare for the interview, how to do the actual interview, and then what work you need to do after the interview. And then I've included in the very last couple slides some questions. Sometimes you're stuck. You don't know what to ask. You don't know what's appropriate. Sometimes you don't know what's not appropriate to ask. So I've included those in there as well. This is kind of an overview, excuse me, of what we're going to talk about. All right, so let's start with your experience. It says, if you were a bird, what kind of bird would you be? I'd be a hypothetical bird. So we're interviewing for information. What do you know about what it means to be an engineer? What do you know about what it means to be a healthcare professional? What do you know about what it means to be a childcare provider? So let's go beyond that, because that's really not the point of the assignment. If you get to the end of this assignment and you say, yep, I didn't learn anything, whose fault is that? Like the whole point is that you learn something new. You can literally ask your career contact person anything. Don't ask them questions you already know. Ask them things you want to know. Don't dig for reports and journal articles of things that you're already aware of. Look for things you're like, I've always wondered about that, or I want to know more about this. So move beyond your experience. Certainly talk about it, but move beyond it. So determine who to interview, prepare for the interview, conduct the interview, and then expand your notes post-interview. So beginning with your experience. Think about the jobs you've had in the field so far. You can certainly note that, maybe talk about that in the introduction, and talk about the contacts or the people that have mentored you or have developed you. Maybe there's a couple books that you've already read that have shaped your view. I know for me, when I was coming up, learning about public relations, one of the books that I read was Women in PR, The Glass Ceiling. A big thing in that field was that, yes, it had a lot of women in it, but it also had a lot of problems with salary because there were so many women in it, and we were driving down salary. So my view of that field was, yes, I'm not going to be surrounded by people that are different from me, but I'm also not going to make a lot of money. So you can talk about, well, this is kind of what I already think about the field. And that was certainly a concern of mine, which is the next point here. I was worried that I was going to be stressed. I knew that PR was a stressful field. And look at what's out there. I think you can know, is your position your job that you want up and coming, or is it something that used to be a popular career and it's not anymore? So keeping all these things in mind. So next, you're interviewing. You're moving beyond what you know and even your secondary to figuring out who you're going to ask to sit down and talk with you. Don't assume that one person is going to represent the field. I'm thinking about people that I know as instructors, and they vary widely. There are people who I would say, yes, that person is an excellent teacher. And there's other people where I was like, oh goodness, no, they do not represent instructors when I think about what it means to be a teacher. I had teachers in grad school that have molded and shaped the way that I try to teach. And I have had people who I'm like, that is what I aim not to be. So when you ask someone, like, what does it mean for you to be a healthcare provider? What does it mean for you to be a counselor? Like, they could be having a bad day. They could be in the wrong field. You want to make sure that you're asking multiple people so that you get a fair representation of the field. I really worry about you just interviewing one person, because what if that one person isn't doing the right job, and then it colors your whole view of the position. So if we were in class, I'd ask you what should you do to prepare for the interview? And because you're all smart, intelligent students, of course you would say you would come dressed appropriately. You would make sure you knew where the location was. You would maybe send the questions ahead of time. You would say that you would prepare the questions ahead of time. That you would think about what is the best method for you to meet up with this person. Maybe it's the phone, maybe it's email. I can tell you that email exchanges, sometimes the person doesn't really want to type a lot, so maybe sometimes their answers are lazy. So having them meet with you in person, usually you get the nonverbal, so you can see their facial expressions, and that sometimes provides more rich data. So I would encourage you, if you can, meet with them in person. I think it also, I've had a couple students get jobs out of this particular assignment. So that one-on-one human contact, seeing you, a face to a name, I would say go for it if you can. If you can't, then the phone would be my next option because you hear the voice. And then email if you can't do that. Obviously, then you conduct the interview, and then I usually like to look at my notes right after. It's a good way to kind of remember what was said, and also if you're scribbling things down real quick, you can clarify. Because I know even in my own handwriting, which I know it's awful, if I look at it as soon as I've written the notes, I can often decipher what it says. All right, so it says, are you qualified? I know you're thinking, all right, who should I ask? And this is a big problem for a lot of people who kind of want an out there job or a different job or an up and coming job, or maybe you don't have a mentor yet and you just are not sure who to ask. There's a couple different ways to approach this. If you have a mentor, obviously that's your go-to person. If you have someone that you're working with, a workplace colleague is a great, person to ask. Faculty is an option. It would be nice if they also had some relevant real world experience outside of just teaching. Certainly, I am not against teaching, but I also have my fair share of real world experience too. And I think that does add something to the classroom. So if you do not know who to ask, it is possible to cold call. I've had a couple students before just call up organizations that they're interested in and say, hey, my name's Elizabeth. I'm a student at Pitt. I'm taking a professional communications class, and I need to interview a professional in my field. I need to learn more about it. Do you have 5 minutes to talk to me? And you'd be surprised how many of them are more than willing to sit down. Like, people love talking about themselves. And I've had, like I said, a couple people, even in the cold call situations. I remember one student in particular ended up having an internship come out of this assignment. So don't be afraid to take a chance. Local firms, organizations, information's from the internet, other research, local chapters and websites of professional organizations. So these are all places where you can find who may be your best option. One thing to keep in mind is if you can't find the exact person that does what you want to do, it's okay to interview somebody within the same field, because I do think you could be like, oh, well, I didn't know that was an option. Well, maybe I'd want to do that. Well, that sounds interesting. So I think you still learn something even if you don't get to interview the exact person that does the exact thing that you want to do, because with us changing jobs every, 4.4 years, it's possible that you may have to do something that you don't exactly want to do, but something that is still in your field. All right, so the purpose and the time. Tell them why, of course, you need to meet with them. I'd say, especially, we did that communication behavioral scale at the beginning, the owls, the peacocks. Owls in particular like to have the questions before, they like to think about it. Tell them how long it's going to take. They are professionals, they have a schedule. Don't keep them longer than you say you're going to keep them. If you are going to record it, you need to clarify that is okay. Make sure that if they want to review the draft, they should be allowed to have a copy of the draft. And a handful of my students before, particularly ones that have interviewed a doctor or a physician, have indicated that they did ask for a report. Some of them may even indicate to you things that are on the record and off the record. So I would ask you to stick to that. So if they tell you something that you can't include in your report or something that you can include in your report, to be mindful of that. Save time by conducting via phone or email. I certainly, as someone who is working full time, as well as being a mom, as well as, just trying to be healthy and all the other things that, we're supposed to do for our sanity and mental health, I understand that we are busy people. So if you have to do this via phone or via email, I'll ask that you do talk to multiple people then, because the information that you get may be a little bit more wide, but it's probably not going to be as deep. So try to, if they can't help you, if they just tell you flat out no, ask them if they say, well, can you refer me to somebody? And make sure that as you're writing your report, as always, as we write everything, try to be concise. I'm not going to take off points if you go over the page limit, but you should still try to be writing in a concise fashion. And this will, by asking them questions via email or phone, save you some time with the whole driving there, meeting them, all that. Again, not trying to get you to not meet them, but I'm a woman who understands how things work and how students' minds work, because I've been one for a long time. So, okay, preparing for the interview. I think it's important to research the company just like you would if you were going in for an interview, for a job. Don't ask them anything you can find out on Google. It's insulting. You know enough about the field too that you're not asking them things that you could find out. I mean, make questions interesting. Make them ones that are going to make them think. Make the questions one they're going to make them want to tell you a narrative or a story. Get really rich, detailed information. Don't have general questions or vague questions. Also, don't lead them to questions, or try not to have closed-ended questions. If you ask them like, so do you like your job? Well, that's kind of like a yes or no, and that doesn't really lead to much else beside that. So do you find that this field is really, really stressful? Okay, well, it kind of sounds like you're telling them the answer that you want to hear. So think about your questions. Make sure that they're not leading. If you have any concerns about the questions that you're asking them, or if they're appropriate, I am fine to look over your questions. And if you're having problems coming up with questions, I can help you look at those too. Now, there are some ones on the rubric that you have to talk about. I do not want to take over your paper, though. The ones that I ask, I think, are ones that are important and ones that I could probably see you talking about anyway. I think I ask you to talk about the positives and negatives of the field. Every field, no matter what, has a downfall to it. Yes, counseling changes lives, but if you're a drug and alcohol counselor, it's very possible that during your time you will have a patient pass. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. I think I also ask you to talk about the ethical implications, and every field has them, even if they're minute and minor. When you're talking about these, try to provide examples. It's not enough just to say, well, sometimes this has this or sometimes this has that. If you can provide a narrative, that's going to make your paper have a higher quality to it. But definitely look at the rubric and make sure that you're hitting all the main points. And when you give your your paper to your peer, make sure that they use the rubric when they're looking over it as well. Don't misquote or misrepresent your interviewee. This is especially something that owls do not like. So that's why a lot of them may ask to see the paper, because they want to make sure that what they told you is what you wrote. So take good notes and tell them if I said anything wrong, let me know and I will change it. I will fix it. A couple tips about how to conduct the interview. Obviously, you want to arrive on time, introduce yourself, chat informally. You don't want to start in with the really, really hard questions. You want to start with something a little light. If you're talking about someone that has a job that is difficult, that involves life and death situations, I wouldn't go right to that. You're talking to a heart surgeon and say, so like when you're operating on someone, do you think about the fact that like they could die like any moment? Is that something you think about? Like that's kind of, yes, obviously that's something they deal with every day. And maybe it's not as big of a situation to them as it was the first time they operated. But that's a big thing to talk about with somebody that you just met. So warm up the oven a little bit. Start with some informal chat. Start with the easy questions first. And then get to your harder questions later. Stay on track. and redirect them. Let them tell their story. I mean, obviously it's their story. They're going to share the information that they want to share, but you also have an assignment, and you want to get through your questions, and you have a certain amount of time. So if you find that you're not getting your answers, and you do have to redirect them, just make sure that you do so politely. Be flexible. What they want to tell you may not be what you asked, and be open to learning something different or getting something different from the interview than what you thought you were going to get. Please do not rely completely on recording devices. I had this happen to me on my thesis. I took no notes at all during one of my interviews. I just used my MacBook, and I was like, oh, it's fine, it's running. It was like 2 hours, and the whole thing, nothing. And I couldn't get that interviewee back. So don't think that technology is going to work. Actually think that it's not going to work, and then don't be surprised. Ask for clarification and if they would like to add anything. The best question you can ask, and I ask this of any kind of situation I'm ever in, I always say, what's the one question I should have asked? Or what's the one piece I'm missing? Or, if you could go back to your younger self and say, if you could do anything different in this career, what do you wish you could tell your younger self? What's the one thing that I'm missing? What's the piece that I'm missing? What did I not ask about? And they will help you. They will tell you, look, this is the piece that's important. I know for me in my career, if I could go back and do anything, I would have just majored in psychology. I love psychology. Do you know why I didn't? Because I was afraid of math. That's silly. I would go back and tell my younger self, Elizabeth, it's just statistics. It's okay. Right? So ask them, what would you go back and tell your younger self? Or what piece am I missing? Or what question did I not ask that I should have asked? All right, post-interview. Check your devices, make sure they worked, update your notes. Sometimes I think it's helpful to type up handwritten notes, particularly because it helps us figure out where we want to put everything in the paper. And then email and a handwritten thank you note. I think email notes are great. I think they're quick. I think it expresses gratitude immediately, which is good. But there's nothing like the handwritten letter. And I think people really appreciate that. And they sell them at the dollar store for like 12 pack cards and a stamp, and it really makes an impression, I think. So here's a couple places to go for questions if you're stuck. I have a note up there. Please copy and paste these. For some reason, they're not working. I finally figured out in PowerPoint how to get the thing to click, but for some reason, they are not linking up. So please just copy these and put them in your browser, and you should have some example questions. The other thing is make sure to look at the career assignment rubric. And of course, this is not a great view, but this is what it looks like. So you can see you have to have 4 sources, 1 to 3 individuals. You're certainly not going to get docked points if you only have 1. I will tell you your paper will be stronger if you have 2. Some things you're always kind of looking for: clear, accurate, interesting, well organized. You don't want basic errors. This next part is the things you have to talk about. So career position, don't let this take over your whole paper. That's just like maybe a paragraph, right? So I just want to know, what does it mean to be a healthcare professional? What does it mean to be a pediatric nurse? Because I'm not one. I know what it means to be a public relations professional. I know what it means to be a drug and alcohol counselor. I know what it means to be an adjunct instructor. And I could tell you all about those things, and I'm sure you'd be thrilled and really enjoy it. But I don't know what it means to do what you do. So just make sure that the lay person can understand what that position involves, what a typical day involves, in like a paragraph. Then talk about the positives and negatives of the career. And again, no rose-colored glasses, be honest. Talk about the ethical implications, have some examples. I think that would be helpful. Talk about the role of writing. Is it a big piece? Is it not so much? And then I want to know, this is your part. This is where you got your questions answered. So that's the critical thinking. What was your questions? So interesting and pertinent information. And then talk about your experience. What was it like to sit down with this person? Was it valuable? Did you learn anything? Did you make a new contact? Do you have a potential mentor? That's kind of another sneaky aspect of this assignment, is I'm trying to help you make connections with people in your field, because that has made the difference for me in my life. it has always been the people that have developed me that have made my career better. And then what did you think about what you learned? Did it scare you? Are you more excited than ever to be a doctor? Are you terrified? Are you thinking about changing majors? I've had a multitude of students write me in, later and say, hey, based on your class, I decided to switch majors. I learned from the career report, this is not what I want to do. And honestly, I'm glad for you guys to find out now than to be older and have to go and take another, a whole nother program or a whole nother degree. So hopefully this was helpful. Please let me know if you need anything. I'm always here. Just reach out.